let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Foote. So Dr. Foote is the co-founder of the Center for Motivation and Change and the co-executive director for CMC, located in Manhattan in the Berkshires. He's nationally recognized as a clinical research scientist who received federal grant funding for his work on motivation treatment approaches and substance use treatment research focused on implementation of evidence-based treatments. He was also a psychologist for the New York Mets, and I'm really hoping that we get some questions that intersect with these things, and continues sports psychology as an independent consultant to professional athletes. Before co-founding CMC in 2003, Dr. Foote was deputy director for the Division of Alcohol Treatment and Research at Mount Sinai in New York City, as well as senior research associate at the National Center for Addiction and Substance Use at Columbia University. He's co-author of the award-winning book, Beyond Addiction, How Science and Kindness Help People Change, a practical guide for families dealing with addiction and substance problems, based on principles from the Community Reinforcement and Family Training, or CRAFT. He's a contributor of 2 workbooks combining strategies from CRAFT and motivational interviewing, the Parent's 20-Minute Guide and the Partner's 20-Minute Guide, which offers specific tools and practice and evidence-based strategies.
This is a discussion about the invitation to change, which is an approach that we have developed over the last probably 4 or 5 years, actually probably more like 7 or 8 years. And we finally decided to start a foundation to help support this effort. And this effort is a lot of different things, but part of it is to do this, what we have on this slide, deliver evidence-based tools for change to families and loved ones of those struggling with substance use. Hopefully this will, over time, provide a sense of community for people who are struggling and for families. The larger goal of the cultural conversation would be to try to change that conversation and the nature of that conversation, because it's really one that's just filled with lots of shame and lots of stigma and lots of isolation. And none of that is helpful to helping people change. So hopefully changing that language and that conversation will encourage hope and compassion. You can go on, Kayla. I'll just nod like that, and then that'll be our secret signal. This slide is a phone call that I got a number of years ago when I was walking around a track on a Sunday afternoon, and I answered my cell phone for some reason because it was a strange number. And I've sort of taken to swapping this in for 5 slides showing prevalence of substance abuse and devastating effects of it and so forth, because from my perspective and sort of like the work that we're doing, this is really more where it's at. Like, this is just people struggling and families not having any idea what to do. And I frankly, you know, one of the things that happens to me when I get a phone call like this, and I've been doing this for 30 plus years, a parent gets on the phone with me and says this, and I feel like I have no idea what to say and I have no idea what to do, and maybe you should go ask an expert. I mean, that's like, because it's so intense and because it's so hard for all of us as human beings, this is not, I mean, so we have lots of great ideas and lots of ways to help, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. But this is just human tragedy, and this is just grief, and this is just a problem for how do you deal with life. And I think that's important to say, because it's sort of like what we're trying to infuse this with, we're just all in this together, and it's brutal. And it's brutal with the overdose epidemic right now, and it's been brutal. It's brutal when I first started with the crack epidemic, and it's like epidemic after epidemic. And it's sort of human nature to be struggling in this way, and to be able to see it in these terms, I think is probably helpful for all of us. So other ways, though, that we can characterize this, and this is relevant to families and the work we're trying to do with families, because our foundation is actually focused on families. Our treatment programs are we're treatment providers for people struggling with substance use. Our foundation is not. Our foundation is to help families, and that could be spouses, parents, friends, kids. And part of the reason and motivation for that whole idea is this set of statistics, which is that this is about people in this country who qualify as having substance use disorder, which is a pretty high bar. Like, that's not just like I drink a little bit too much and sometimes I get a hangover. Substance use disorder is bad. And if you look at that number of people, this is the number of people who get treatment, which is not much. So you're in the 75 to 90+% zone of people who have that level of problem who are never getting treatment. And the foundation's approach right now is based on that idea. How do we actually help? Because you could never train enough people like me to help. The numbers represented behind those bars in that last slide is tens of millions of people. So the numbers represented behind them in terms of their families is 4 or 5 times that number of people who are impacted by this. 3 to 5 loved ones are negatively impacted for every person who's struggling at that level. And the usual kind of impact is this stuff you would think about, like there's all these health problems and financial problems, productivity, relationship problems, all this kind of stuff. And then, psychological things, depression, stress, decreased happiness. That's all true. That's all part of that. The other impact, though, that is not really being addressed is the impact on families and loved ones, which is mostly the idea of going underground and the idea that shame and despair are what families are left with. And they're really not left with tools to help. One of the original motivators for us to also about this foundation was people from the Partnership for Drug-Free Kids coming to us and saying, you know what, we get thousands of calls a year of parents wanting help. And we've been telling them the same old thing for year after year, and they're sick of it, and they don't want to hear it anymore. And they're saying to us, we want evidence-based ideas. Can you please tell us something? Like, I went to Al-Anon, it was helpful to me, but I need more. And so that was part of the genesis of all of this work that we've now been doing. We made a little video of just sort of like what the culture is about. So if you're a family member and your kid, your husband, your dad is struggling in this way, that's pretty devastating. Like you look up, you reach out, you say, I need some help. Who can I talk to? And this is sort of showing what people step into when they first say, I need some help and I don't know what to do. And then what we're hoping, the second part of this is where they might go. So we don't have time for this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm just curious if anybody had any particular reaction to that. I don't know how we're going to even talk about that, but you can just unmute yourself maybe and all hell will break loose, but you can unmute yourself and just say a quick response if anybody has one.
Okay, I'm unmuting. It reminded me of what we do in trauma-informed practice, where you take a completely different stance from internal. It's not about what your practices are, it's the shift from judgment to acceptance to kindness to curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it.
I'm unmuting myself. I think it just changes the whole way that you feel about the issue at hand with like your family members that are struggling. It gives you a sense of relief and like, okay, there's a chance that, you know, we could do this, versus the other one is just completely shut down.
For me, it kind of symbolized, like, as a society, how we look at some of these problems and how we need to shift that view if we want to address this more without the societal stigma, which is what's holding a lot of people back and making us less successful.
We have some written comments. Someone said they wanted to cry. Someone else said, I've experienced every one of these emotions.
Could I make one more comment? One more comment is that I was surprised that all the negative words, I think those are the words we currently use. And I don't think I had really realized how every one of our vocabulary words right now are negative. And I know we want to shift to the positive, and I'm sure the professionals do that, but largely in life out in the public, it's all of the negative impressions that get thrust upon them.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And I wish all the professionals spoke differently than that, and they don't. So that's another problem. I'm actually going to give a talk for professionals out in Oklahoma next week and yell at them about that. But it is one of the problems. It's sort of like the same language. It's in the culture. It's the same language. It's in professional language as well, and it's kind of shocking. And back to our person who called me on the phone. That first set of words would be typically what he would get from a provider. Is that kind of language. And you know, I really appreciated the comment that someone just made about, like, if you see those all those words together, it's a little shocking. It is really shocking, and they all pile up that way, and they kind of pile up on people in a way that's like, I'm at my most vulnerable. I'm terrified that my kid or husband or father is doing terrible things, having terrible things happen to them, and this is what I'm going to hear. So it plays into the idea of stigma. It plays into the idea that there's a set of words that describe people who are struggling in this way, and we can just use those words about them over and over. And the problem, one of the many problems with stigma is that when there's stigma around, people won't go for help. If they know that I as a parent or I as a treatment provider are going to have an attitude that includes these kind of words and these kind of attitudes and judgments, why would I go to you for help? And family members don't either, because family members feel embarrassed, and family members feel like they're responsible. And even if they can say to you, I know I'm not responsible, they still feel responsible. And that's like study after study of stigma indicates that. Okay, Kayla. Which is really a shame, because one of the things that we also know is that the leading influence on people in terms of the decision to seek help is their family. It's the leading reason for people to try to seek help. And we're scaring their families away and making their families feel bad with the language that we use. And the language includes, you know, all this kind of stuff of codependence and enabling and all this kind of stuff that that makes people feel blamed when they walk in the door. I want to help my son. Well, you must be, you know, we need to examine your codependence on this situation. It's like, okay, it's just another thing that's been thrown at my head here. I'm having a hard enough time, and now you can tell me I'm codependent. Okay, so you can go on. So we decided to, based on a lot of the work we were doing, we spent a number of years training, starting with craft that Dr. Croft mentioned. And I can't, since we're not sitting in a big conference room, I can't ask how many of you have familiarity with craft, but craft is one of the leading evidence-based approaches that we have for helping families help their loved one. And that's kind of where we started 15 years ago, is working with Bob Myers and some craft projects and so forth. But as we started training parents to do this themselves and train parents to coach other parents, there was a number of elements that we wanted to include that weren't part of that. So we have continued to work at that. We've continued to develop this model based on training and talking to parents and family members and seeing what's helpful to them. With this idea that we want to be able to hand these ideas and tools over to families so that they can use them themselves and don't actually need professionals. And professionals are great. But as I said at the beginning, there's too many people suffering and we need more help. So we can't possibly manage this in the context of professional help. We need more than that. And if what I can offer in the world of more than that, in terms of self-help or peer-to-peer support, isn't helpful to people, then that's not so great either. So this is a set of tools we're trying to develop for lay people and professionals both, to have them be accessible and be actual evidence-based tools. And part of that then has been to bring families' lived experience of what this is like into this model, because that's been a very powerful force in learning how to help people more effectively. Okay. So I said some of these things. It's designed to be accessible and understandable. That was sort of one of the primary goals. It's a compassionate approach. It's meant to encourage change, and it draws on evidence-based principles and practices of behavior change. A lot of times people come away from sort of starting to understand these ideas and go, well, that's not just about addiction stuff. That's like about my 4-year-old and also how to get my husband to take out the garbage and stuff like that. And that's 100% correct. These are basic behavior change principles, and how do you encourage change and how do you reinforce positive movement? It happens to work really well with substance use because that's another behavior. And we'll talk about why it's very specifically helpful when people are struggling with substances, but it is just another kind of behavior that people struggle with and might want to change. So these are ideas that come from these three main approaches. We kind of synopsize them by saying science and kindness equals change, because that's kind of what it is. There's a lot of science and a lot of evidence-based ideas, and delivered without kindness and compassion, not so helpful. Okay. We have this cool little wheel. These symbols are going to change as this becomes more published, because I think like the Homer Simpson guys will sue us if we use their symbols, stuff like that. So we have to kind of change some of those, but they're kind of catchy, you know, and they're meant to kind of convey these ideas in ways that are understandable and ways that are things that people can remember. So there's 3 major sections. We're going to start with helping with understanding. Since this is such a short little blip of a talk, I'm trying to not have it be a massive roller coaster ride. So it's likely that we will get through helping with understanding and helping with awareness, which are sort of the newish ideas that you may not have a sense of. And the helping with action section we'll leave out. That's more about behavioral tools like communication and behavioral reinforcement ideas. Those are pretty straightforward. The first 2 are the sections I'd like to get through, and we'll see how far we get, okay? So let's go on then. This first section is got 3 parts to it. So this is the helping with understanding, and this whole model is helping with understanding, helping with awareness, and helping with action. And those are the 3 central ideas. And this is the helping with understanding section. So the idea here is getting a little bit of a perspective shift on what it is that we're dealing with here, and what are we trying to help with, and how do we help best? Take some shifting of our way of thinking about both substance use and help. And so there's 3 different topics in this one. The first one is behaviors make sense, which I'm going to talk through now. And the other 2, one size doesn't fit all, and ambivalence is normal, are just kind of subsets of that first one. So we'll start with behaviors make sense. Go ahead. So there's our little guy putting his hand on the stove. You can go, and then here's the new perspective we'd like to talk through. Kayla will let us. So the basic idea, which is very straightforward, and I remember explaining this to my brother one day 4 years ago, who I think his kid was struggling with some substance use issues. And I was just sort of walking through this idea, and we were just sitting in the backyard, and he's a contractor in Boston and does a lot of rehabbing of houses and stuff like that. And so he doesn't think about these kind of things particularly. And I walked through this particular idea, and he just looked at me and he's like, that's really heavy. And I thought, that's exactly what I hoped you would say. Like, it is really heavy, and it's really straightforward. So I'll walk you guys through it, and we'll see if you guys think it's really heavy too. So the basic idea is of any behavior, but we're talking about substances, is if using substances was like touching a hot stove, we all wouldn't be having this little conference tonight. Your loved one would have stopped using already. There would have been nothing reinforcing about that behavior. And the only reason we repeat behaviors as humans and as mammals is because it's reinforcing and we're getting something out of it. I'll explain this a different way. So if I told you this, that I could help anybody here in this conference tonight, that I could help you mellow out or feel less depressed or feel good or take away your boredom or help your physical pain or make you excited or help you socialize or let you feel part of something or help you focus and concentrate, help you lose weight, also cut your anxiety way down, make you a really funny person, help you appreciate other people, give you a really good night's sleep, and help you face the day every day. What would you think of that? Would that be like a bad thing? First of all, you wouldn't believe me, but if you believed me, would that be like normal things that you would want? And I'm just assuming everyone's nodding right now. Yeah, it would be. And they'd actually be really, for some of us, some of these things would be life-changing. Wow, I'm gonna get a good sleep. Holy, that's really something. Like, and I'm gonna get away from this sort of depression that claws at me all the time. And I'm gonna be able to not feel anxious in my skin all the time. That's incredibly valuable. I'll take it. Do whatever you got, I'm taking it. Okay. Okay. So if I told you the answer that I had was called alcohol or heroin or pot, those substances would do these things, and they do these things. So the interesting question there is, does that make any of those things, if we go back one slide, does that make any of those things that I want out of that? Plunging forward. Does it make any of these things not things that make sense to want anymore? No, it just means the way I'm achieving them is with substances. Because the things I want make sense. My methodology for getting them, it's got some problems. But it doesn't mean that what I want doesn't make sense. And the next slide with this little Scottish proverb is one that I've always liked, because it's what the treatment system does with people. We talk about their drinking, but we never talk about their thirst. We never talk about why it's important to me. And when we don't talk about why, we leave people out. They know that we're not actually looking at them. We're looking at a problem that we want them to stop. We're not actually looking at them. All right, there's a little video we made. I think will sort of illustrate some of the impact of this also. So let's try that.
Imagine this scenario. You're walking down the side of a two-way street when you look up and see a person trying to cross. There's plenty of traffic and you can hear cars and trucks whooshing by. person you noticed looks impatient, upset, frantic, and does not seem to be considering the danger ahead of them. Instead, all they seem to be concerned about is getting to the other side of the street. Take a moment to consider the following. What are your thoughts and feelings about this person and their behavior? And what are some actions that those thoughts and feelings make you want to take? You may be thinking, what's wrong with them? What's making them crazy enough to try and cross traffic without thinking? Are they dangerous? You may be feeling scared for what's about to happen, anxious for the person you're watching, and confused by their behavior. Some actions you may want to consider include moving away from the situation by leaving so you don't have to see the person get hurt, or engaging in the situation by yelling at them to stop to try to promote a positive outcome. Continue imagining the same scenario, only now I'll give you a little bit more information. Before you saw this person, they had been driving further down the road with their dog in the back seat. At a stoplight, the dog jumped out of the car and began running through traffic. The person is now frantically trying to get the dog back inside of the car before it gets hurt. Now take a moment to consider the following. What are your thoughts and feelings about this person after learning about their reason for trying to cross such a busy street? What are some actions those thoughts and feelings make you want to take? You might be thinking, how can I help this person? How do I keep him safe when he's upset and not thinking about his own safety? You might be feeling compassion, sadness for the person's situation, and fear it might go badly. You may be more inclined to take action by offering to help, calling for more help, or trying to intervene in some way. The purpose of this exercise is to show that when another person's behavior seems irrational or erratic or scary in some way, in the way that substance use often does, it can push us into a let me get away from this or make it stop response, and make us want to move away from it entirely. It can be hard to see how to be helpful in these situations or to even want to help, while also experiencing our own set of thoughts and emotions as a bystander. By taking a moment to put the behaviors into a larger context, by understanding the why behind their behavior, we can start to make sense of the motivation behind them. We can then decide on a productive way to move forward. So let's think back to the scenario we just imagined. If we start off deciding that the person running in the road is doing it just because they're crazy, then we are also limiting ourselves from seeing the full picture. This way of thinking is natural, but does not facilitate positive action on our part. Instead, if we decide that the person trying to cross the road has a valid or a sympathetic reason for their behavior, we open ourselves up to more understanding. We can now accept new information and learn that the person is trying to find their dog. This information will most likely shift our thoughts and emotions surrounding the behavior, and we'll then be able to come up with and want to come up with a productive plan on how to help them. Finally, let's put this all in the context of substance use. If we decide that a person who is using substances is doing so just because they are an addict, aka a morally bankrupt, irresponsible person, we will very effectively shut out information that could help us understand their behaviors. And without that understanding, we won't be able to find a constructive way to offer support. However, if we open ourselves up to understanding that all behaviors make sense, we will learn that people use substances for valid reasons. Examples could include using substances to ease anxiety, feel more ready to handle daily life, or get to sleep despite physical pain. This type of information will then help us begin moving forward by supporting our loved ones in a productive way.
Okay. There's a lot in there. As I said, it seems like a simple idea. It's not. It's a lot to get your head around. And if you're a family member and you're struggling with somebody in your family who you love and who's terrifying you or disrespecting you or doing bad things or whatever's going on, it can be really hard to kind of, let me see if I can put myself in their shoes. It really matters and it really helps. And here's the way it helps you as a helper. this is a list of the things that it does. It helps you not take the behavior as personally. So your substance use is not like a personal insult to me, and I can't believe you're lying again. If I can step back and go, okay, I get that. It has nothing to do with me actually, why you're continuing to do this. That actually helps increase empathy for the other person. That actually helps increase collaboration with the other person. And it also is going to give us some very important clues as to how to help. Because then their behavior actually is not just this random series of assaults. It's more based on, I know how bad their anxiety is, and I know how they don't feel like they have any friends, and I know the only way they ever feel that is when they smoke pot. And okay, I can put that into context now. None of this means I think it's great, and none of this means I agree and it's fine, go ahead and keep using. That's not what we're saying. We're saying if you can understand where they're coming from, it will help you help them. That's all. And it actually allows you to start to strategize. What are some things we can put in place that are different than their substance use that could be helpful to them? Because that list of stuff that they're using for, that they're getting out of this is not stupid. It's really good, the stuff they're trying to get. They're just getting it in a way that's causing a lot of other problems. And the thing that it does for them to be able to do that, if you don't mind, the next slide, Kayla, is it helps them feel validated. And it actually is going to then allow them to be more open and then not go underground and not feel like everything they're doing is unacceptable, which the byproduct of that is it'll let them consider change more. Okay. So that's the idea of behaviors make sense. And I am now letting go of the idea of how far I'm going to get with this discussion with you guys. And I'm going to just try to get through this first section about helping with understanding in a calm, collected manner. So the next part of this is one size does not fit all. And if you kind of get your head around the idea that the behavior makes sense for that person, the next thing that's really important to understand is it makes sense to each person in a different way. So we had that list of things that if I could do this for you, wouldn't that be great? We could have put 100 things on that list about wouldn't you really want this in your life, okay? And those are different things for different people that they would want. It's more important for me for the sleep. It's more important for me to have pain relief. It's more important to me to have an ability to socialize with other human beings and not be hidden in my house all the time. And that's a critical thing to be able to start to understand what is going on with this particular person I'm trying to help, okay? You can go ahead, Kayla. Go ahead. So, these are the principal ideas in the one size doesn't fit all. Behavior really is complex. One size doesn't fit all. People really do these things for different reasons. And I can sit in a substance use treatment center like I'm in right now and sit in a group of 15 people. And all 15 people came here for different reasons, got into their substance use problem in different ways, and are going to get out of it in different ways and for different reasons. They're just different. There isn't an addict sitting there. There's 15 different people with 15 different things going on. And the reason that matters is because different strategies are going to help them then. It's also going to be really helpful in terms of the way they perceive the help you're trying to provide. If they recognize that you're actually understanding them and have some options that make sense to them, they're much more likely to take them. And that's just basic motivation 101, okay? How do you help motivate another person to change anything? Is have it be something that makes sense for them personally, not makes sense for everybody, makes sense for them. Okay, here's a little slide sort of portraying this idea of one size doesn't fit all. So here's 3 different people. I'm 35, I have PTSD from being in Iraq. I don't know what career I want. I'm using a lot of opiates. I've been doing that for 10 years now since I got back from the military. And I've been in a lot of rehabs, and I was even in jail in a psych hospital. Okay, that's me. I'm 55 and I'm super stressed and things are not going so well with my wife and I'm using a bunch of cocaine, and I've been doing that on and off for 15 years depending on my work stress, and I think therapy is a bunch of crap, by the way, so don't even talk to me about that stuff. And I'm 15 and I have really bad social anxiety and I have some depression also, and I'm smoking a bunch of pot, and I've been doing that for about 6 months since my friends turned me onto it, and I only see a therapist because my parents forced me to go to one. What's the common theme here? Don't trust therapists. No. What's the common theme here is that there isn't a common theme. So what is our answer? We should all go to rehab, or you should send them to wilderness camp, or you should kick them all out of the house, or you should wait till they all hit rock bottom. That can't be correct. Any one of those answers might be correct for any one of these people, but they're all different. And lumping them together is sort of the definition of stigmatizing people. Okay. So why does this matter? So the first part for the helper, for the family member, is it provides some help, some hope in knowing that there are different ways to help. A lot of people feel like, I've tried so many things. Okay, right, so let's keep trying. There may be other things that are really helpful that you haven't thought of. Or you may have been told only one thing or only two things by treatment providers, and there's actually 10 things if you thought about it. They don't have to go to treatment. They could talk to their uncle who's in recovery. That might be the person to get through to them. They don't have to go to wilderness camp. They could do something else. And for the person struggling, allowing them options and choices is just going to, I mean, this is also motivation 101. It just increases the chances of buy-in. And that's what you want, is you want buy-in. You want the person saying, okay, that makes sense. All right, I'm willing to give that a try, Mom. All right. And the whole thing is to help decrease the sort of black and white. There's one way to do it, and you got to do it. And if you don't do it, that's on you. That kind of thinking. That kind of thinking is just doesn't help people. Doesn't. It helps us sometimes because we're mad, but it doesn't really help them so much. Okay. It also helps you, next slide, helps you think through and ask a different set of questions then if you realize that different options are available and that that different things are going to be important to them than they might have been for you in your own recovery, or for your husband's recovery, or for the kid down the block and at where he went. It might be really different things. So to be able to ask these kind of questions, what are some options for treatment? What might be helpful? Why would it be helpful? That kid really needs a psychiatric evaluation for his anxiety. Like, nothing's going to happen if that doesn't happen. That person has PTSD. So they're going to continue to drink until we can actually put that on the table also. That's different from the person who doesn't have PTSD. And also what resources do we have that have nothing to do with treatment, you know, at our church or at support groups or community members who could be useful to them. Also helps us ask questions like, what new behaviors could replace the old ones? And then the more compassionate question of, so my kid has got really bad anxiety. That actually is part of why he smokes pot day and night. It makes me crazy, but that's true. So in trying to help them, it's really useful for me to think about what's going to be hard for them about doing this. Because I can say, you really need to do this. That doesn't help their anxiety. It doesn't take it away. I can feel that way, but it doesn't help them move. And it doesn't help them accept the support, okay? So the last part of this then, next slide, is about ambivalence. And there's our Homer Simpson. So there's our little coupon there on the left, which you can read. It says, purchase any 6 lean, this is an actual coupon that we took a picture of. Purchase any 6 lean cuisine entrees in a single order, and you'll receive a free 56-ounce container of Edie's ice cream. You guys get this joke now, right? I can't hear you laughing. It's so loud in here, but so this is ambivalence. I want one thing and I want another thing. I want to be on a diet, and my doctor told me my health is really contingent on it, and I really like ice cream. And those both are true. And that doesn't make me a bad person, right? I like ice cream. I'm not a criminal. I like ice cream. And I really want to exercise more because it feels really important to me. Okay. Okay. So just go to the next slide. So the idea is here, again, we started with the idea that the behavior makes sense. There's something important about this substance using behavior to that person. It's not random. It's not it's reinforced behavior. That's why they're doing it. So when you think about ambivalence, which is, can you consider some new behaviors? Can you consider starting yoga to help with your anxiety instead of smoking pot every morning? What you're looking for is, can we come up with some new behaviors that can compete with those old behaviors to serve that same purpose? But the issue is it doesn't erase the old behaviors. It just doesn't. That's not how our brains work. If we had an erase button, it would be awesome. And we could just say, I don't even know what marijuana is. What are you talking about? You just erased that from my brain. But that will never happen. And I will always know that it helps me with my anxiety. And yes, I'm willing, because you're talking to me in a different way now, Mom, and you're being more compassionate about it, and you're giving me more options. I'm willing to think about doing yoga, but I'm not so sure. And my brain will always remember that I can always smoke pot, and that will help me with my anxiety. Okay. Other things about ambivalence, you can see it in someone's behavior. You can see it in the way they're talking to you. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. I'll talk to that therapist. That sounds great. Yeah. That's ambivalence, right? I don't want to talk to that therapist. I'm petrified of talking to a therapist. Is this a trick? And I sort of do want to talk to them, and I'd like to make you happy, and I think I have a problem, and all those things can be true at the same time. And how we interact with someone in terms of when they're ambivalent matters a lot. If we hammer them, if we say, this is what you need to do and there's no other choice, what you get for that is their ambivalence going underground. Okay, no, I know I've been screwing up a lot. I know I'll do that. I absolutely, I'll do that. When people say stuff like that to me, I'm like, oh God, I just lost them. Like the thing I want to hear when I'm working with somebody is, yeah, but I want to keep smoking. Yeah, I know you do. That's what we're talking about. So is there some way we can figure this out that allows you to let that go? Because I can't make you not do that anymore. Is there something else that we could do that would be helpful for you that isn't that? And me trying to ban you from doing that is probably not the way that we're going to do this effectively. Okay. Why don't we just go on to the next slide? So if we looked at, go back for 1 second, if we looked at the positives of use and the negatives of use, okay, and if you can think about someone in your life who's struggled with substances, and you can think about what do they get out of it? They like being with their friends, and it's fun getting high, and it's a good way to blow off steam at the end of the week, and you name it. What are the things? And then we listed the side, on this other side, the negatives of use. It's causing me to fail out of school, and I've been keeping getting suspended, and I'm not on those teams anymore, and my parents are really mad at me, and those are all true also. So we list those out. So then the next little click there, Kayla, if we asked you, do you think that those positives that they listed about how much fun it is to be with their friends and all that kind of stuff was erased the negative stuff? Does that take away the fact that they're also suspended from school, they're not on the soccer team anymore, and that their parents are really mad? No, of course not. The positives don't erase those. But then the next question, to be honest, is the next one, which is, do the negatives erase the positives? And the answer to that, unfortunately, though we'd like it to be true, is no, they don't. So we can focus a lot on that question that disappeared, on the negatives erasing the positives and thinking, of course they do. That's so bad. Of course they wipe out those positives, but they don't. They are both coexisting. Okay, and to be able to take that in as somebody trying to help another person and not have to deny the positives and not have to say we want those negatives to erase those positives. I've had people come into our rehab and say, I just don't want to think about alcohol anymore. I don't want to ever have any cravings anymore when I get out of here. I'm like, okay, sorry, wrong rehab. Because that's not going to happen. You're going to still think about alcohol and you're still going to have cravings. We cannot erase that from your brain, but we can actually increase your sense of confidence that you could do this another way without drinking. But we can't erase it. And to be able to understand that when you're helping somebody is a hugely helpful thing to them. Because it means they can be seen by you as a whole person and not have to pretend. Not have to pretend that that part of them that so badly wants to go smoke a bunch of crack again doesn't exist. It does exist. It can exist, and it will exist. And you can still help them and work with them. And they can carry that person who wants to smoke crack sitting in the passenger seat of their car for the rest of their life if they want to. And we're trying to help them learn how to drive the car without that person taking the steering wheel. But we're not kicking them out of the car. Just to mix a million metaphors. Okay, let me go on back to our circle one more time there. Actually, and yeah, go ahead, sorry. keep going forward. One more. Nice. So here we go. We got through 1/3. And we should stop and talk a little bit, and you guys can ask questions. The other two, just so you know, the other two sections are awesome, but we're not getting to them. So the other two sections are awareness, and the basic idea of the awareness section is you are part of the change process. When you're helping someone change, you're not operating on them like they're on an operating table. You're there, you're part of this change process yourself. And the more you are aware of yourself, the better you're going to be at helping them. And like for parents, the classic thing is the more you're able to actually understand how angry and upset and betrayed you feel and not act on that and use some self-compassion instead and become aware of the fact that pain is going to be part of this process and it's okay. You don't have to make it go away. That's a sort of profound thing to realize as a helper. I'm in pain because I love them and they're struggling and it's really hard to stay connected to them, but I can stay connected to them. I don't have to do things just to try to make the pain go away, like drink myself or send them to wilderness camp or kick them out of the house. I don't have to do those things actually, if I can accept the idea that this is just painful and it's okay. And that's sort of a hard one to get your head around too, but also kind of profound, because it changes the way you walk through this whole process. It helps you be less reactive. It helps you take a breath. It helps you not step into all those kind of interactions that you know you don't want to step into, that you know are not helpful, that you know make things worse for the next 3 days or 3 months. And how do we find ways to pause and go, that's not what I want, actually. That's not my value. My values are not screaming at my kid. I want to do this a different way. And you can. It just means that the pain will come along with it. And the action, as I said, is more about communication tools. How do we speak to people? And how do we react to people in a different way that's reinforcing of positive behaviors, is not engaging in the fight and the chaos as much. So those are the other tools in those other two sections. And the last thing I'll say is, if you want to go to the very end, Kayla, to the practice slides, just one more comment. Stumbling in positive change.
Sure, I'm just gonna, thank you, by the way, everyone, for bearing with me. I am working on a broken keyboard today, so I'm just gonna scroll to the practice slides really quick, and then I'm so sorry, everybody.
Just one other central idea in this whole thing is this idea of practice. And the reason we say it is because we have a little saying, we say behavior changes with behavior changes. Like behavior doesn't change unless you change something. So getting people to start to do things different literally is critical. That includes you as a helper. Learning how to communicate and use different communication tools is something you need to practice at, because none of us are good at it. Learning how to notice positive things and reinforce those. Learning how to remember that this behavior makes sense. All that stuff takes practice, and we're not good at it at first. And for the person changing their substance use behavior, that takes practice for them also. That's all new behaviors for them too. And to be able to bring that idea to this process is actually quite helpful as well. For those of you who actually are struggling with family members or people you love, I think all these things actually apply. If you care enough to learn stuff to help them, that you love them, that you're being brave by hanging in there, that you're going through what you're going through and not giving up, and that you're trying to make things better. And for that, you deserve a lot of praise.